In this episode of the Plant Strong podcast, I sit down with Damien Mander. If that name doesn't register with you initially, he has a remarkable segment in the Game Changers film. He is the founder and CEO of the International Anti-Poaching Foundation. It's located in Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe, where since 2009 he has been protecting different endangered wildlife species such as black rhinos and elephants. He is doing really spectacular work there. His background, he was an Australian Royal Navy clearance diver. After doing that, he joined the Army and did 12 tours of duty in Iraq as a special operations sniper. This is a man that has an unwavering ability to just go right to the truth in an unflinching and unapologetic way. He shares his kind of life's journey, ups and downs, in a way that is just heartwarmingly honest and refreshing. I love so many things about Damien and what he's doing. Just so everybody knows, there is a lot of profanity in this episode, and that is just kind of part of his Australian, kind of demeanor, and so take it in the spirit in which it's delivered. But in 2020, as we are faced right now with a planet that is warming, we have COVID-19 that is raging throughout the globe. There's never been a more important time for us to hear the message that Damien has to offer. So with that, I hope you enjoy this episode with Damien Mander. I have a favor to ask before we kick off today's conversation with Damien Mander. The grocery system has been turned upside down the past couple of months. The Plant Strong team is working to increase access to the Engine 2 Plant Strong food line outside of Whole Foods Market, where the products have lived exclusively for the past 10 years. We could really use your help. What I'd like to ask you to do is to visit our show notes for the podcast and take a brief survey. We want to know where you shop and whether or not you'd be interested in online access to our Plant Strong products. Thank you in advance for your time and your feedback. I look forward to sharing some exciting announcements on this endeavor very soon. Gang, I want to welcome Damien Mander to the Plant Strong podcast. Damien, it looks like you're in Zimbabwe, aren't you?
Rip, how are you, brother? I'm good, man. I'm in Zimbabwe. Many of the expats that were over here have flown back home to Australia. I'm an Aussie, but this is home for me now, so here we are.
Yeah. And the last time that I saw you was January 2018. We were in Sundance for the Sundance Film Festival for the premiere of the Game Changers film that you and I both were fortunate enough to be in. And you have a remarkable part in that movie. Now, before I get to that, I want to ask you, so when James Wilkes and Joseph Pace and Louis Sahoyas flew over to Zimbabwe, probably back in 2016 or 17 to film you for this, did you have any idea that these guys were the real deal and that this was something that would turn into something like this?
Look, I'd met James first, and it was quite a few years earlier. You only have to do a quick scan of a guy like that's bio, and you realise, like, if he dives into something, he's not messing around. So when he got in contact with me, say, hey, look, we're doing this doco, I'm like, okay, cool, and he didn't have a lot of momentum behind him at the time, and then he started building a bit of a crew around him, and like anything, hey, when you start from scratch, it takes time to get momentum, and the sort of guys that you're talking about there, and they're not the sort of guys that stuff around. It just takes time to get things off the ground, and they did it. They nailed it. So, did I have an idea how big it would be at the time? No. Was I confident that these were the guys that could execute such a strong message? Yes. So it's great what they've done. The fact that it's been in so many living rooms around the world. I still get emails every day. People saying they've watched the film, they've gone plant-based, and I love that sort of stuff. I love it. I love it more when they're people like the guy that I used to be. The macho alpha type, and it's like, watch that movie, and I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah. So the guy that you used to be, I mean, tell me, because outside of, Sundance and spending maybe 15, 20 minutes with you and getting a kiss on the cheek, that I'll have to put up on Instagram. I don't know much about, the guy you used to be. Can you share that with the Plant Strong audience?
So, I mean, to take it back to, I suppose, a teenager, hey, as a lot of young guys are trying to figure out who you are and where you fit into the world. And I don't know what it was. Actually, I'd tell you what it was. A small seed, and I was doing it. Like whenever I do a podcast or an interview or something, that's like my form of therapy. And I got asked during an interview last year, why did you grow up trying to be like this tough guy and all that? I remember when my parents separated when I was 12, and I changed schools, and I used to get the shit beaten out of me every day at school. I was quite young, 7 or 8 years old. And then I grew up like thinking, oh shit, I never want that to happen again. And so, I became, always trying to be tough and this macho guy, and eventually took aim at the vulnerable, and that was through hunting. And this is before I joined the military. So I became, I was always out there hunting or shooting, out there hunting animals, and in the worst kind of way, as the person that did it for fun and not for food, or not even for fun, for trying to grasp on desperately to some form of primal respect. And then I joined the military. I went through, I did some of the toughest shit you can imagine. I became a clearance diver. That's our form of Australia's version of the US Navy SEALs. Going through, our version of BUDS. It's called CDAT, the Clearance Diver Acceptance Test. 12 days of getting between 1 and 2 hours sleep a day, and just getting absolutely punished. And I've never been super long distance runner type, endurance type guy. I was always the heavy lifter type, and that coming out the other side of that program, I was invincible, bulletproof. Went online as a diver in the Navy. Then September 11 happened, changed the world for a lot of people, changed the world for me. A new unit called Tactical Assault Group East was formed, a very small niche special operations unit within the Australian Army. So I transferred across from Navy to Army. I've been there for 2 days and told I was going to be a sniper. So that was it, 3 years in Iraq, a bunch of tours over there. And I never hunted after Iraq because I knew what it was like to be hunted. And that was sort of, it was the Iraq had a way of breaking down the layers of ego that had been built up over, first through insecurity, and we're all a product of our past. So this ego that had been built up, mainly trying to protect myself from the world, and from my own insecurities. And then, eventually that gets broken down. You get a different lens through which to see the world. And it was that lens that led me to conservation and to animals and to where I am today.
So, did you ever know Paul de Gelder when you were back in Australia as part of the Royal Navy clearance diver?
Man, yeah. So Paul is a good mate of mine. I've got a good story about Paul. I chat to Paul regularly, and we're over. He was over filming, doing a doco with us. We're in the bush in Zimbabwe, and filming a doco. And so we're doing this unarmed combat, and so there'd be basically 2 rangers fighting one person, and you'd have to go in there. And so I go in there against the 2 rangers, and I got fucked up pretty quickly. Hey. These guys, but bearing in mind, I did train them, so I'm happy to be fucked up by my own subject. And then it's Paul's turn. Now, anyone that hasn't seen Paul, get on Instagram and social media.
Paul was on season 1 of the Plant Strong podcast. So a lot of our listeners know who Paul is, but yeah.
And he was one of you. He spoke at the conference too, didn't he?
Yeah, he spoke at Plant Stock last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now Paul gets in with these two rangers, and Paul has a far less tolerance for shit than me, and he's not taking any shit from these guys, and so he's got these guys in a headlock, and he's going for the home run, and he's trying to take these guys down, and he's doing a good job of it. But in the process of that, his leg comes off, and because he's got a prosthetic leg, and then the arm comes off, and he's still messing these two guys up. But then at that time, a vehicle drives around, and it's full of tourists, and all they see is these two rangers looking like they're beating the crap out of this guy who's missing a leg and an arm. He's on the ground. And I'm like having to explain to them, hey, this is it's cool, this is part of the filming, and Paul's actually beating these two guys now. But it took a little bit of explaining to do because they were horrified, But Paul is also, I suppose as we all are, a product of our past and the hardships that we go through. And, he's a tough guy through what he's been through, but he's a tough guy because of the lessons that he's learned, and he's copped on the chin, and he's taken it, he's moved forward, and he's used all the scars that he's had in his past to make himself who he is now.
Very much so. And he attributes you in a big, wonderful way for his kind of transition to going plant-based.
Yeah, cool, man. The vegan.
Yeah. Well, big time. Let me ask you this. So you did, what was it, 12 tours of duty in Iraq?
So I went to Iraq as a contractor, private contractor, worked alongside, it was part of US coalition, US-led coalition. And for us, contractors, the shortest period I did over there was 2 weeks. The longest period I did was 6 months. So, you're going in and out. But I've done, a dozen times I went over there. So over 3 years. Yeah.
So, after 6 times, you kind of probably know what to expect, or, and I'm wondering, like, at what point were you like, okay, I've had enough of this. I don't need to go back for a 13th or a 14th time. Was it the money? Was it the money?
Yeah.
What was it?
Yeah. So, we were, as contractors over there, we were making a hell of a lot of money. And I have a tendency to be able to spend money quite quickly. Fortunately, my mother, who was into real estate, when I was still in my teenage years, recognized that I was shit at saving money and told me to start investing in residential property, which I did. So I bought my first house at like 21, and then had been building up this residential property portfolio in Australia. And then the money I was making in Iraq was just all going into that. And then, of course, every time you leave Iraq, it's like, shit, I've come out alive. So you go out and, I wasn't married, didn't have a family. So I was backpacking around the world, traveling. And then, of course, that's the first party you break is like, shit, I've made it out. Awesome. Let's go and party. But then the second half is like, okay, I'm going back to war in like a week or 2 weeks. It's like, fuck, it might be my last holiday. So, we'll party for the second half of the trip as well. So that in itself is a bit of a, you're just like swinging, man, like from war to like just this chaotic travel schedule and back to war. And it's a pretty turbulent time. Hey. And I do a lot of speaking in America and traveling around and speaking to audiences that are quite acutely aware of the amount of suicides, veteran suicides we have in the US. 22 veterans a day committing suicide. And you go from these units, whether it's special operations or whatever unit you're with, where you're surrounded by people that have been through what you've been through. They've got your back. I mean, you know that sort of, and I'll say brotherhood because the units I was with, they're all men. I don't know if when you were in with the fireys in Austin there, if there were women involved, but it was, for us, it was a brotherhood. Yeah. And then when that stops, the brotherhood stops and the purpose is gone. And purpose, I think, is the most elusive thing in life. So, I decided to leave after 3 years. I'd made a shitload of money and invested that into residential property. Financially, I didn't need to be there anymore. From a complacency standpoint, I was waking up in the morning, signing out weapons and rolling out onto missions, and it's like, fuck, it's just another day at the office, and that's not natural. And the complacency that had set in with me wasn't fair on the people that were alongside me, and so I was like, fuck, I don't need to be here anymore, and I'm not supposed to be here anymore. That chapter's closed.
Yeah. But So I just want to like revisit that just for a second, then I want to move on. But so, I mean, it sounds like it was an insanely dangerous place to be. And was it just because you didn't know what else to do? That you just kept putting yourself back into that, you know, that bullseye, that target of danger? Or was there certain like euphoria about going back and doing that? You mentioned the swings back and forth.
Man, it's just becomes normal, hey, you know, by the end, you know, there's 9 years into doing that shit, and it's just what you're trained to do. You know, I went from school. I was supposed to go to university. I think you guys call it college. I was going to go do graphic design and then doing a bit of electrical work here. None of that worked out. I was a fucking garbologist, man. I was chasing a garbage truck, picking up garbage cans. That was my job before I joined the military. Hey, so I joined the military, and it's like, fuck, I never looked back. And yeah, it was just, I don't know what it is. You just get caught up, and then eventually I suppose the dangerous part about it is it becomes normal. And then, you know, whatever the trigger point is, it's like, okay, I don't need to be here anymore. I didn't, my parents didn't know I was in Iraq. I didn't tell my parents for the first 2.5 years that I was there, because I got a very close relationship with them. I was quite nervous about how they would react, knowing that I was in that situation. So I just said I was working as a security advisor in Dubai, and then a few guys that I worked with got killed, and they knew that we worked together, and you know, that was in the newspapers back home. And it's like, fuck, yeah, all right. Sorry, mum. I'm in Iraq. So, but yeah, it's
well,
it's you know, I mean, reflection on it, you know, young kids going over there to fight the arguments of old men. I wouldn't change a thing, but you know, when you've got a bit of distance between being there and where I am now, and being able to look back and reflect on it, it's a shitty thing. Eh?
Yeah. So, and when did you come out of Iraq for the final time? What year?
It was the end of 2007. I think I got out. On Boxing Day. Hey, 2007 was around then. Yeah, so I just stayed. I had my birthday, which is just before Christmas, then Christmas, and then just went straight to South America. Yeah. And
so, any you got any PTSD or any kind of depression from that experience?
You know, I really do count myself as one of the lucky ones. And when I say one of the lucky ones, I mean one of the few lucky ones. And the reason I count myself as lucky is because I found a purpose after that. And that purpose is something that's become a passion, and that is animals. And that was an accident, man. Didn't think it was going to end up where it ended up. Had I not found that, then who knows? You know, I mean, in the last handful of months, less, I've had 4 or 5 guys that I've worked with or been part of the units that I was with that are committed suicide. Yeah, it's a shitty thing, hey? You know, and countries that want to send their kids to war need to be able to figure out how to pick up the pieces when they come home. And I don't think we've done that yet as a society. And often you look at a department like Veteran Affairs in Australia, which it seems like a constant battle in trying to keep people from getting the help they need. It's like an insurance company, and they don't want to pay out the claim. You know, they don't want to give the help, and so people struggle, and they struggle to a point where they go, well, rather than keep struggling, the easiest thing for me to do right now is to fucking end it. And that's, you know, when guys are saying the easiest way for me to move forward from here is to end my own life, then you know the system is broken.
You mentioned that you found your purpose, right?
Yeah.
And it's really saved you. What led you to Africa to begin with? You know, and what year was that?
It was, mate. I came here for adventure. So after Iraq, I took, you know, this sabbatical type leave. You know, 9 years military service, still had 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a couple of marbles rolling around upstairs. So I saw that as a reason to go and celebrate, and celebration turned into, you know, instead of just going for a bit of a a trip to South America, it turned into a pretty rapid downward spiral of drugs and alcohol. And, I just ended up like partying all day, every day, really. And just, using that as the excuse, like I've earned this reward. And I was picking like I was looking at different people that had done different things, and I was picking the certain parts from their lifestyle that I thought were okay, and stitching them together to build a picture of what I thought was all right for me to live as some sort of reward on the back end of what I'd done in the military. And, fortunately, I hit rock bottom. I was one of the lucky ones that bounced, hey. And a lot of guys, when they hit rock bottom, that's it. And I decided.
What did rock bottom look like for you?
2 days a week, Monday to Wednesday, on any sort of drug you can imagine, and a bunch of alcohol, and then break in the middle, and then do it again Thursday through to Sunday. Reset, go again. Reset, go again. Reset, go again. I left Iraq about 117 kilos, ripped. I don't know what you guys do in the pound scale, but it's quite large, hey.
Well, 170 times there's 2.2 pounds in a kilo, so you were
like 260. It would have been 260 pounds, so 117 kilos, probably like 260. Yeah. I was in awesome condition, and then within 10, 11 months, I was down to 89 kilos. I was like a shaved bird, man. Right. I was just not eating and just treating myself like shit. And again, would I change anything? No, because that was the kick in the ass I needed to give myself to get back on track and sort my life out. But I'd heard about anti-poaching. It sounded like the next romantic adventure, and I got on a plane and went to Africa, man. Yeah.
Right, and then you're in Africa. Are you in Zimbabwe? Where are you when you came across this elephant that had been mutilated?
Yeah, so I traveled around the southern part of the continent for about 6 months, just meeting people, getting to know the lay of the landscape in terms of conservation, who's who, how things are done. Trying to get a job everywhere, but everyone saw me coming, and I was walking in and saying, hey, look at me, I've got all these skills and shit. Just give me a job so I can run around the bush and hunt some poachers. And I was there for all the wrong reasons, and not respecting or acknowledging that some people have been doing this for decades. My attitude changed the more I traveled and the more people I met. And my attitude was, when I arrived was, I want to do this for 6 months and get the next set of pictures for my social media. And then it started, the more people you meet, the more people you realize, hey, it's not, there's more to life than running around looking for your own next adventure. And particularly seeing rangers. And I got to start working with a group of rangers in Zimbabwe. After traveling through 5 countries looking for that opportunity, it happened in Zimbabwe. And having come from Iraq and seeing the amount of money that machine was spending on chasing oil, really, and sending kids home in body bags, and then you see rangers who are fighting for the heart and lungs of the planet and got fuck all. They've got a lot of them didn't even have uniforms or boots or the right training or anybody to give them the time of day. And I just fell in with them and started training them, seeing the response that we were getting just by giving them that time of day, and putting all my own money into trying to uplift this unit and then other units and providing more training. And I'm like, okay, well, this isn't very sustainable. And that's when I started the IAPF, International Anti-Poaching Foundation, in October 2009.
Wow. And so what animals exactly are you guys protecting?
So we started off as an organization that would go out and recognize areas where what we term high target species are being hunted by poachers. So an elephant or a rhino, the value of its tusk or its horn, in the case of a rhino, these are being targeted by organized crime syndicates. They hire or they put a reward or a price on these products. So you get these insurgency-like units, paramilitary-like poaching units crossing international borders using heavy caliber rifles, automatic weapons to go and hunt these animals. And so when we stood up the organization, we said, well, let's go out and do what we're good at. Let's be the last line of defense for these animals, standing between the guy with the gun and the animal. And that's what we did. We started with our own area that we were based in, then training other units, expanding that out. And over the years, we've evolved as an organization, like we evolve as people. Nature has got billions of years to evolve. Us as individuals or as organizations, we've got a lifetime to cut away the bits that don't work, keep the bits that do, and keep moving forward. And that's what we've done as an organization. So starting as an organization back there in 2009 that went out and trained rangers to defend elephant and rhino, we actually have 5 parks of our own in conjunction with, in partnership with local communities. We've got over 1 million acres. We'll have another 600,000 acres, I would say, by the end of May that have been signed up. So we'll have 8 parks under our portfolio by then, and training a growing force of rangers that go out and protect nature. So not any one particular species. What we found or come to realize and acknowledge is if you just protect the area, then every animal, every species flourishes. And that's what we're about now, is trying to hold on to as much of the natural world as possible.
So since 2009, have you found the amount of poachers that are going after the rhinos, the elephants, and whatnot, is that getting worse? Is it kind of receding at all? The
projects that we've taken on, I'm not trying to blow ourselves up here, not in that sort of sense, like blow ourselves up, but talk ourselves up. The areas that we've committed to, there has been dramatic downturns in poaching. For example, when we took on the project along the Kruger National Park border, in the southern third of Kruger National Park, you're looking at about 1/3 of the world's remaining rhino population when we took over that project. When we set up on the other side of the Mozambique border, where most of the poachers were coming through, in the first 6 months, we drove a 90% downturn in rhino poaching.
Wow.
In the area directly next door to where we were. And at the end of 2016, that had helped lead to an international downturn in rhino poaching for the first time in almost a decade. The lower Zambezi Valley, where we are now, it's an area that had lost around 8,000 to 9,000 elephants in the 16 years prior to our occupation. Since we've come there's been an 80% downturn in elephant poaching across that landscape. We've just picked up a large contract. And when I say contract, a partnership to manage a piece of land in conjunction with local communities, which is further to our west. And in that region, 75% of elephants had been lost, say, in the last 15, 16 years. So we're going to try and replicate what we've already proven in other areas and just keep driving this downturn. Poachers are people that will go where the job is easiest. And, if we create a presence in an area, they do migrate to other areas, but we back that up with work in special investigations. So whilst we protect one area here, we're everywhere in terms of our investigations work. And that's those two working together is where we get a lot of our results. When I say results, in the last 3 years between special investigations and the women, and we can get onto the fact that we actually do, scouts are women. There are almost 600 arrests that have been made in the last 3 years alone.
Wow. So do these poachers ever go after you guys? Like, are your lives in danger at all? Or
we have had rangers attacked in their own homes. I'm quite protective about where I live and what I do. And I've got a guard stationed at the front gate there.
Wow.
Ultimately, we're taking money away from organised crime. And there isn't a day that doesn't go by that I don't think about the risks that are being taken to do this job. And people do get taken out. A guy at Wayne Lotter, head of PAM's foundation up in Tanzania, similar type guy doing a similar type job for an organization he started. It was a similar size, and he was assassinated I think August 2017 on the way to the airport in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Bike pulled up next to them and filled the car with an AK-47 magazine. So it's there. The good thing is that I've built an organization that is not relying on one person. We've got a brilliant team, and if I go and bring it on, motherfuckers, if I go, there's a brilliant team that has already got the slack. And, we're expanding, even with the current crisis that we're going through, and we're seeing millions of jobs being lost around the world. You'll see if you go onto our Facebook page, we're actually advertising for more instructors. We're still recruiting, we're still growing the organization, we're still increasing our footprint.
Yeah. So when I spoke to you at Sundance Film Festival in 2018, you had just mentioned to me how you were starting to bring on women as rangers, and how they were just so absolutely fantastic, and you were so impressed with them. And and you just mentioned it. Are most of your rangers now women, and why is that?
So that program that I spoke about along the Kruger National Park, Mozambique border, it was a heavily militarized operation, and conservation is becoming increasingly militarized, not only across the African landscape, but around the world. And that's through frustration and desperation. And if you see guys coming with automatic weapons and heavy caliber rifles, you sort of think, well, we need to push back against that. And to push back against it, you need more guns and more manpower. So the operation in Mozambique, we had helicopters, aircraft, canine attack teams, drones, and we essentially mounted this war against the local population. And the local population was where all these rhino poaching syndicates were operating from. And we were spending truckloads of money on maintaining this war. We were achieving our mission of stopping rhino poaching, stopping poachers coming through that section of the border. But with this long-term war that we were having just wasn't sustainable. We're doing the same thing that we did in Iraq. And if I left Iraq, not only with a bunch of money, I left Iraq with something more valuable than that, and that was a lesson. And the lesson was that you can't send in a foreign force and expect to have a long-term good relationship with the local population. And it's exactly the same thing that I moved into in conservation, and replicating the same mistakes. Didn't know any other way. It's if you're under attack, what do? You fight back. It wasn't until 2016, 2017, we're starting to see more and more industries getting ahead by getting more women into management, more women on the boards, more women as CEOs, and then reflecting back on our own industry of conservation and seeing where women are outnumbered on the ground in the bush by around 100 to 1. And so it's like if I said to you, Rip, we want to put this person into a management position at the fire station, but they don't have any real ground experience, you'd be like, that's crazy. People are going to lose their lives. And it's the same with conservation. We couldn't just grab a woman and put her in as a manager, because they need to be able to get that experience from the ground up and rise up through the ranks, because when they have to make shitty decisions in a tough time, people's lives are at stake. And so if women weren't getting that access to the experience they needed, then they couldn't genuinely rise up through the ranks and fulfill management positions in conservation. And that for us was a huge roadblock. If we can't get ahead like other industries are getting ahead, are we still going to be talking about animals going extinct? And so we started scouting around, saying, we want to try this program. We want to train an all-female force, armed all-female force. And we got closed doors everywhere. Nobody wanted to take the risk, even though we were willing to put up all the capital. And eventually we found an abandoned trophy hunting reserve. And this part of the whole equation was an accident. But I'll talk about the economics in a minute. And if we start to look back at the whole trophy hunting angle and how this has fit together, it's been a huge blessing, really. But so we found an abandoned trophy hunting reserve. Trophy hunting is a dying industry across many of Africa's countries, where it's used as an economic model to support conservation. The reason it's dying is we've got shrinking wildlife populations across some of the major ecosystems and landscapes where hunters would come. Second reason is a shifting policy or regulations surrounding the export of certain trophies. For example, ivory from Zimbabwe to America. And Americans made up more than 50% of the clientele that used to come to Zimbabwe and hunt for elephants. Okay, so they're not allowed to export that ivory back to America anymore. So 50% of the clientele is wiped out. The third reason is you've got a generation raised on social media that just doesn't want to get on a plane anymore and fly across the world to shoot something in the face. So if you look at Zimbabwe as a country, 20% of the entire landmass of this country was set aside for trophy hunting. Areas held in trust, owned by the local communities. The local community has used hunting as the economic model. So they would lease those areas out to what is called a hunting operator. The hunting operator then has a quota, X amount of elephant, zebra, kudu, impala, lion, that he can then go and sell to foreigners. So they come over here, they go out with the operator, they shoot their animals, they pay the money, they go home with their trophies. So when the hunting operator is failing economically, these areas are left vacant. And you're talking about vast areas of land. And across the African continent, there's an area the size of Texas that has been set aside, collectively the size of Texas, that's been set aside for trophy hunting. So if trophy hunting is no longer working as an economic model, we need to find something to fill the vacuum. And that's where we went and started speaking with local traditional leaders and rural district councils or local governments, saying, listen, we want to trial this program. You've got nothing to lose. You've got a vacant block of land there. It's not making any money. It's either going to be lost to human settlement, cattle grazing, illegal mining, and timber harvesting. So, let us trial this model. And they were very reluctant in a very patriarchal society to allow us to, even with the track record we had and successful operations we had using men, to bring in our model and say, oh, instead of employing men, we're going to employ women. And so they said no. And eventually we negotiated a 3-day period with them to do a trial, like a mini sort of special operations selection period, and put the women through that. And it was those 3 days that just, they blew it out of the water. The women that we brought onto that program absolutely blew it out of the water. And there was no question in anyone's mind there and then that this was a program that we needed to grow and take forward. Wow. Sorry, that was a long-winded.
No. And so how many women do you now have that are part of this force?
So we started with 16. We've got 120 on the books now. 80 of those are in training, so they've been through the initial part of training. We've had to stop training at the moment because of the pandemic. Training has been postponed because you can't have groups of people that big together. We will employ another 80 women before the end of the year, and then another 80 in the first quarter of next year. So we're on target to have 20 parks or preserves of our own by 2025, with a force of 1,000 women protecting those areas.
That's fabulous, really fabulous.
You know what, Rip? I think so too, mate. And they do, mate. I'm so proud of them. Like they're ass kickers, hey? They are doing an amazing job. They've made 191 arrests already. They've helped drive a downturn in elephant poaching across the entire landscape. But the women that we've all employed, they're all survivors of serious sexual assault, domestic violence, AIDS orphans, single mothers, and abandoned wives. And so we basically and these women got no concessions, hey, zero concessions from us, because in the eyes of most, they had more to prove. And so we put them through hell, mate, and they would look back and smile. The harder we pushed them, the more they smiled and laughed and giggled, and it's like it nearly drove me crazy. But they're tough. They're brilliant at doing their job. We've had, if we start to look at the things that make this program a success, Zimbabwe has one of the lowest ratings on the Global Corruption Index. So if you can come here and remove corruption from any equation, you're already halfway home to achieving whatever it is you want to do. We haven't had a single incidence of corruption with the women. The women naturally de-escalate tension. Women seem to be a little bit different than us males in that respect. Not to stereotype, but they want to talk to a problem before they blow it up or shoot it. And which is great when you're trying to have a relationship with tens of thousands of people that live alongside an area you're trying to protect. They're brilliant at collecting information, and information is what leads us to allocating the limited amount of resources we have in the most effective way. And around the world in law enforcement, around 3% of crimes that are solved by catching someone in the act. The other 97% are solved through intelligence-led operations, which requires information. And that's the women are brilliant at that. So, that's where we're at.
We need we need more women doing more in every walk of life, government, you know, you name it, law enforcement, firefighting. They are just so much more emotionally, I think, suited for so many things. They're amazing human beings. They really are.
Yeah, you know, and I think a lot of the access or opportunity that is lacking out there is just a matter of us guys being able to step back from the ego barrier that we keep in place, and just saying, you know, there's a different way of looking at things. It doesn't mean it's better or worse. It's just different. For us, it's been better. I mean, it shifts for us. It shifted the entire economics of conservation, because the increasingly militarized side of conservation going on here, and then on the other side, you're trying to do more and more community work to counterbalance this war that you've got going on, and it's expensive. The women that naturally de-escalate the tension with the communities that they come from, we employ all our rangers and scouts come exclusively from the local community. So they've grown up in these communities. Their grandparents were there. Their parents raised them there, and they're going to raise their own children there. It's where they're from. They have a long-term vested interest in the well-being of these communities. Historically, how we would form anti-poaching units is we would recruit from around the country. We would bring in a unit to protect an area from, at some point in history, the local population had been forcibly ejected from to create that park or that reserve. So there's already hostility. And the reason that we would bring in, well, not necessarily foreigners, but people that were foreign to that area, is to avoid corruption. We didn't want people to have collusion with uncles or brothers, fathers, people they'd grown up with, giving information about where they're going to be patrolling, or where the animals like elephant or rhino are going to be. What that did is it dispersed the biggest line item in our budget, which is ranger salaries, around the country. And so all this conservation funding was being dispersed away from the area that we're actually protecting. And then the guys would go on leave, they'd go back home and take their money with them. And that for us was a way to reduce corruption. Now with the women, and as we continue to expand this operation, having not seen a single case of corruption, we can employ 100% from the local community. And what that does is it turns the largest line item in our budget from something that was being splashed around the country to something that is now going into the community, not at government level, at no other level other than household level, and into the hands of women who spend 80 to 90% of their salary on family and local community, versus a male that spends 30 to 40%. So we are actually, with this model, we're putting the same amount into the local community every 34 days as what trophy hunting was able to do per annum. So we have a viable economic alternative to trophy hunting, which is only working with women at the center of the strategy.
Wow. Wow. What's the cost of living like there in Zimbabwe?
More than, I think 52% of the population lives on less than $2 a day. So I think those figures from about 2016, 2015.
Right.
The updates. Yeah. It's tough, hey? It's tough. You know, it's you know, we've got, there's economic problems here, there's cash flow problems, there's high unemployment. Yeah. It's a beautiful country though, man. It's a beautiful, wild country. You know, you know, I love it. Put it this way, man. I've been fortunate enough to travel around the world and see lots of different places, meet lots of different people, and this is the place I choose to live.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, so I think you said you have about 160 women right now that are part of the organization. Is that correct?
So this project has 171 personnel, 120 of which are women.
Okay. And I'm wondering, you know, I think that the Plan Strong audience, this is, you know, right up our alley. If people wanted to kind of get behind and give to this organization, like, what if somebody was to give, let's say, $500 or $1,000?
Yeah.
What could that do as far as you bringing on so many women to help with your efforts?
So 1,000. So the entire program is vegan too. So
we're gonna talk about that in a sec.
Yeah. Well, so $1,000 provides food for one ranger for an entire year.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's everything from food to salaries to equipment, their tactical equipment, even the unfortunate stuff that they have to also carry, personal protective equipment, non-lethal and lethal munitions, whether it's a firearm or whether it's the pepper spray or taser guns. That sort of stuff is also used. And I'll say after 191 arrests, the women have only had to fire shots once. So it's not something you can teach. This form of democratic policing, they have it, and it's far more valuable than biceps or bullets. When you can go out and have this relationship and be able to de-escalate a situation, not only about the situation that's unfolding, but about the repercussions that come from the local community, the community that I mean, some of our leases, the longest lease we have is 46 years. So we've got to maintain a relationship for 46 years. And I tell you what, kicking doors down and putting guns in people's faces is not the way to do that. So yeah, I mean, there's vehicles, fuel. These are all things that we continuously having to fund. The whole situation that's unfolding at the moment around the world. Interesting, hey? And it just the twists and turns that we're all going through on a daily basis. And I don't think anyone is immune to the effects that it's having on our business, on our lives, on our families. But we saw this coming when we started. Over here in Zimbabwe, things are a little slow in terms of the virus spread, which is great, but also in terms of, I suppose, getting some systems in place. But, watching the news in America or Australia and seeing where this was going, I'm like, okay, this is going to hit here. It's going to, if it does take off, it's going to hit probably harder than places that have more well-established infrastructure. We predicted a 75% downturn in funding over the next 12 to 18 months, and we did models working on that. We then went over the cash reserves that we had, and we essentially scrutinized every single dollar that was being spent in the organization. We're able to make cutbacks, delay certain projects, delay some expansion, and work out a model that keeps us safe for the next 18 months and being able to maintain a footprint on the ground. This is 2 to 3 weeks ago when we actually finished implementing all these changes. In the last few days, we're starting to see articles coming out, the Guardian newspaper on Bloomberg, saying that one of the greatest things we can do to negate the chance of this happening in the future is to protect wildlife and to stop wildlife from getting into these markets in the first place. Because once it's in the markets, it's too late. Yeah. So what we need is we actually need to be able to stop poaching from happening in the first place. And look, I never thought I'd be sitting here saying, the job that rangers do around the world is part of protecting the future of civilization itself. I knew about the protecting animals and protecting nature. Nature is Earth's self-regulating system. I just didn't think things would become so front and center so quickly.
By now, I hope you've treated your dog to a high-protein, high-fiber meal by my friends at Wild Earth. They make dog food and treats that contain 0 animal products and have everything your dog needs and nothing they don't. My dog Jade is one active dog and has to keep up not only with my family, but with me when I go out for my 10 to 15 mile mountain bike rides. I love knowing that I'm giving her the healthiest, cleanest food on the market. Try a bag today and save 40% when you use the code PLANTSTRONG at wildearth.com or amazon.com.
So let's talk about you and your journey to becoming plant strong, right? Becoming plant-based. When did that start? Because I'm sure you didn't in 2009 when you started this organization, the founder of the Anti-Poaching, International Anti-Poaching organization, you weren't plant-based, correct?
Nah, I used to eat my steak blue, like literally run it through a warm room, and that was it, hey. And that in itself was like this macho thing. I used to love the taste of meat and steaks and all that, and I was just, I don't know. You know what it's like, guys like to think that they're proving something by the size of their steak, or maybe we're making up for something that was lacking. I don't know. But yeah. And then I used to go back to Australia each year from Africa, 2009, 10, 11, 12. and I do these with a team back there. We had a whole committee. We used to do these music festivals called Raw for Africa, and then there was some people on the committee who were vegan. I was like, fuck, bloody vegans. And they say, can we serve some vegan food here? Like that, this is in the first festival. I'm like, yeah, we can serve some vegan food. And then the next festival was like, well, they were saying, well, why should we be serving meat if we're trying to save animals? And I've still got the emails, hey, my responses, like fucking chickens are not going extinct. Cows are not going extinct. Look at all the work, all the typical excuses. Look at all the work that we're doing protecting these animals. Like if we're gonna serve up some animals over here, I think we've earned the right to do it. And all the bullshit excuses that I'm sure you've heard over the years tenfold, I was telling myself, but ultimately, I was bullshitting myself, and I'm not someone that likes to do that. And more and more, what I was, traveling around the world, giving lectures and talks and doing events and that. And what I was saying, I'm getting up on stage saying we've got to look after wildlife, looking after animals. But what I was saying and how I was behaving, we're off in two different directions. And that didn't sit well for me. And for a lot of people, hey, it's daunting. You got to try and figure out, one, how am I going to eat and survive? And two, how am I going to fit into the social structure that I've known for my whole life up until here? And what are people going to say? And I was out patrolling all day, protecting one group of animals, and then coming home cooking another animal. It's like it was bullshit, man. It was a hypocrite. And I knew it. I still suppressed it. And then I was asked to do one of these TEDx talks, the Sydney Opera House, about anti-poaching. And I don't know exactly how I stumbled into it, but I ended up watching Earthlings.
Yeah.
Earthlings. And I watched a talk by Philip Wallen. Don't know have you heard of Philip?
I haven't.
He used to be the vice president of Citibank in Australia. He's been a great mentor of mine over the years. Ran an organization called Kindness House. It was basically a city block of buildings that he made available to hundreds of different animal and environmental charities, and provided all the basically rent and administration costs for free. But he supports charities all over the world. So seeing some of his talks, I'll send you a link after this. Actually, maybe you can post it up there. And it's brilliant. And Gary Yourofsky, watching that, and then I got up and did my talk at the Sydney Opera House for TEDx in front of 2,500 people, and I spoke about speciesism and about what had by then become my transformation from this former hunter, steak-loving buffhead into the vegan hippie that I'd fucking despise so much previously because I was so fucking scared of them.
What were you scared of? What do you think you were scared of?
The truth, man.
Just
the
truth.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. And so was it after that Sydney House TEDx talk that you basically decided, all right, I'm going plant-based? Or
I'd gone plant-based during the research for that.
Okay.
So quite some months beforehand. I'd gone vegetarian, and then less than 12 months after going vegetarian, I switched to being vegan.
And so did you? And so And so did you get a lot of shit from your friends and family at all?
I mean, I still get shit from some people, and I love it. Bring it on, because I've got just an arsenal of responses. And I will still say, it's the best thing I've done in my life, the single greatest decision. Because I mean, at the moment, as you and me sit here, we've got women, we've got rangers out there risking their lives, having to carry weapons to defend animals, and I can get out of bed each morning knowing that I'm protecting animals just by not eating them. And that, that's the simplest way to defend animals, is don't stick them in your mouth. But I don't get too much shit from too many people, Rip. But when I do, it's generally from some of the alphas out there, and I'm like, okay, well, if you're an alpha, why do you want to fucking hurt something that can't defend itself? And the thing that really got under my skin with myself is that I was paying someone else to do something to do something to someone else that I didn't really want to do myself. So
yeah, well, all you would have to do is just like rip open your shirt and show them that seek and destroy, and they'd like turn around and run. Oh, yeah.
Look, well, it hasn't faded away yet. That's the beautiful thing about a tattoo. Stuck there forever. Yeah.
Speaking of that tattoo, when did you get that, and what was the thinking rationale behind it?
Man, I got that after I completed our version of Buds, the CDAT, and was online. I was training to be a clearance diver, and I don't know what it is. I'm very curious as to know why I just became that, that sort of product after, I had a good upbringing. I went through shit at school when I was a kid, but I just don't know why. I was like desperate to be this macho guy, and I think if I knew why, I could probably speak better to kids that like the kid I used to be. I'm happy to speak to hunters and shit. It's who I used to be as a hunter and exploiting animals and all that, and I get asked a lot, fuck, I'm just exhausted from having these conversations to people and that they're not listening, and it is, about veganism, about animals, about going plant-based, and I keep saying to people, just keep having your conversations and keep getting better at them, because the truth is accumulative, and it took me years for the truth to finally penetrate, but once the shutters come up, they never go down again. So just keep having a conversation, because a conversation, anyone's listening out there now, a conversation you have today with someone that you're frustrated with, or you're seeing as exploiting an animal, you may feel as though that conversation is going nowhere, but I guarantee you that it adds up. And it might not be your conversation, but the conversation you've had accumulates to the end product, and eventually people come around to the truth. If they hear it enough, if people are open enough to the truth and acknowledging it, and I think now is what a great time in the middle of this crisis. What a great time to acknowledge that our exploitation of nature and animals is quite possibly not this time, but has the potential to be the demise of our entire civilization. Is that worth a couple of pork chops or a slice of bacon? I don't think so.
No, absolutely not. No, this is our time to get this right. It truly is. And hopefully we won't mess it up, because you know what? There's a lineup of probably another 12 pandemics that are right behind this one.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. And who knows what's been stopped already, or what's waiting right there on the edge of these markers to be taken in there.
So when people ask you the protein question, well, Damien, where in the world do you get your protein? I want to read this quote from the Game Changers, because I think it's it's brilliant. And one of the things that I think that I love about you the most, Damien, is your unflinching ability to just go right to the heart of the truth, and you speak to it in such a visceral way that people like get it. You don't mess around on the edges. You're just a straight shooter, right? And it's a beautiful thing. We don't have enough of that. But you say, look at a gorilla. A gorilla will mess you up in 2 seconds flat. What does a gorilla eat? I just do the same thing as these big great things out here. I just stick to the plants. I love it. I love it. Yeah. And the way you say it, it's just awesome. I mean, you probably have in one fell swoop there gotten more men to come on board. It's beautiful.
So I actually didn't go vegan or plant-based for any health reasons. Obviously, I get all the health benefits from it, but for me, it was an ethical decision. And so I actually, you talk about, where do I get my protein from? I don't sit there and count and add this shit up and that. And I'm in good nick at the moment, hey, and I'm working out every day, doing a lot of body weight stuff. I'm stronger than I've been in over a decade, I reckon, since I was in the military. But I do it, so it's just a lot of whole food plant-based stuff. Hey, I'm not calorie counting or grams of protein counting or any of that sort of stuff. It's just, you know, maybe I'd be stronger and better in the gym. I go out there and just eat a shit load of food and eat healthy food. We've got awesome gardens here. We've got 5 acres of gardens up on the projects where the women are based. We've got 7 vegan chefs cooking in the bush now. We've got a growing army of women doing one of the toughest jobs in one of the most remote locations. They're kicking ass, and they're doing it on a plant-based diet.
Is that because of you? Is that because of you that they're mostly plant-based?
When the women came in for recruitment, I said, look, you know, you can do what you want when you go home, but when we're here on the project, when we're at work, we're serving a plant-based diet, and this is why. And we started a program called Back to Black Roots, and that's getting back to where this continent was raised on, mostly on a plant-based diet. And you know, Western influences here have brought this meat-rich diet into so many villages and towns and cities, and we've got huge problems with heart disease, with blood pressure, with diabetes, with stroke, and so we created this program, Back to Black Roots, teaching all our staff from a nutritional, environmental, and an ethical standpoint on why we serve plant-based food on this project. Stage 1 is the staff, stage 2 is the family, stage 3 is the communities, and stage 4 is building ambassadors. And so we've got this growing community now of people that are eating more and more a plant-based diet, and not only eating it, but they know how to grow it themselves. We've got a garden projects going on in local communities. We've got a grant to start one in one of the local schools, so kids are going to be growing their own food for their own lunch. You know, so this is an important part of the program to be driven by plants. Now, a lot of the women, when they went back home in the beginning, they said, you know, they would go back and eat meat on the weekends. But now most of them, and obviously we don't want to enforce anything on anyone or what they do in their own home. Most of them are now coming back and saying, not only am I full-time plant-based, but my family is as well. One of the interesting things that the women said when we were sitting around the campfire one night, is they said, we were once vulnerable and we were exploited. And we're now in a position of power and authority, and we don't want to project that onto anything else that's not deserving. Animals being at the top of that list. And that hit home for me, hey?
Yeah. Well, I love all that. I love the fact that these women, you're introducing them to this, and now they're taking it back to their families, their villages where they live, and it sounds like also maybe their husbands, right?
Yeah.
Or kind of, whereas if it was the reverse, how many of these men would go back and then tell their families, hey, we're going to eat plant-based because they're probably not cooking for the families. I mean, this is huge.
We had a male anti-poaching unit, one of the other projects that we'd run for many years. And I tried to implement a trial period of plant-based meals. I said, look, we'll get a chef in, we'll cook. And at the time, the guys were cooking their own food, supplying and cooking their own food. Okay, we offered to bring in a chef, supply the food, give them a wage increase just to trial it, because we knew it was going to be so much friction there in proposing this thing. And I nearly had a mutiny. Okay, these guys threatened to walk off the job if we implemented this trial. And I'm just like, guys, it's just a trial, And they said I was coming here as a foreigner trying to influence their culture. I'm like, hang on a second. You need to look back to this continent, African continent. There's so much of it was raised on a plant-based diet where meat or animals were killed for ceremonial purposes only. And the majority of the rest of what people ate was plant-based.
You actually say in the Game Changers towards the end of your segment there that the biggest threat that you guys face is the meat industry. And how they're slowly basically taking away, the lands there, inch by inch, mile by mile.
I mean, you look at the putting animals into an area to graze is one thing, but the amount of land that's needed to grow food crops that are the majority of which are fed to animals. I mean, you hear figures of 1 kilogram of, you guys have got the whole pound thing going.
That's all right. Go with kilogram. Go with kilograms. It's good. It's good.
1 kilogram of grain to produce a kilogram of, 70 kilograms of grain to produce a kilogram of beef, and that's like handing over a bunch of money and getting not much back in return. And it doesn't make sense. It takes 48 times more water to produce a kilogram of beef than it takes to produce a kilogram of vegetables too. And in the water-stressed environments for which we live in, we want to create sustainability in our projects and in the communities that we work with. People clear cutting land to put animals onto graze or to grow crops to feed animals. We have a very small window here as a generation, as a civilization. We look at what we're doing to the Amazon, where the majority of the clear cutting that's going on there is for cattle grazing and the beef industry. And I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of E.O. Wilson, perhaps the foremost biologist of our time since Darwin. And he for his Pulitzer Prize-winning book Half Earth, he said we need to set aside half of the planet for nature to stop our acceleration into the sixth mass great extinction, which for the first time in history is a man-made phenomenon. And at the moment, we've got about 17% of the Earth's surface set aside for nature. What we can't do is to lose any ground. And when we look at these hunting areas or areas that have previously been used for hunting, if we lose those or don't come up with a different model, they're going to be lost. But also as conservationists, we have to recognize that our work can't be 9 to 5, right? We got to really, there's no point going out all day and protecting one group of animals and then supporting an industry that's actually responsible for a lot more destruction than what poachers are doing. That's the agricultural industry. We need to be able to walk the talk. And I've been criticized for saying there's two types of conservationists. There's vegans and there's those that don't want to take their work home. But you know what? And we've lost funding over the years. We've been ridiculed. We've been pointed out as being radical because I take that standpoint. And you know what? The truth isn't for sale.
Right. Let me ask you this. So how are your brothers and sisters doing in Australia? I know Australia's been hit hard with the fires and, the results of climate change. Have you checked in with those guys?
Yeah, I was on the phone to my brother this afternoon. He's got an Anytime Fitness gym franchise. So that's obviously shut down. He's got the rights for a second franchise that he was going to open up. My mum's just lost her job, same job for 25 years. My dad's out of work now. This is I sort of grew up in a fairly stable environment, upper middle class, it's crazy to watch all this happen, And look, they're optimistic people. They trained me, my parents, so I picked up a lot of the ability to be able to find the positives in any shit situation. And they're doing the same at the moment. They're preaching their own mandate. They're fulfilling their own mandate, and it's tough. I was back in Australia over December and early January. I flew from Sydney to Melbourne, 600 miles. There you go. I use miles instead of kilometers. 600 miles. I didn't see the ground once from the time I took off till I landed because it was smoke the entire way. Billions of animals estimated to have been killed during those fires. And this is just Earth telling us we need to stop behaving like assholes and start realizing that we are not at the top of the food chain. We're one of one cog in a big engine. We're the only species though that can determine what level of suffering is acceptable for everything else that's out there. But we need to stop. We need to stop trying to dominate everything and try to figure out where we fit in, not how everything else fits in with us.
Mm-hmm. Man, Damien, you are amazing. You really are. You are truly amazing. What are your parents super proud of you and kind of what you're doing? Do they understand the magnitude of it?
Yeah. Look, I have a very fortunate. I've got a great relationship with both parents. My mum was very young when she had me. So it's not a huge age gap. She was 19. So wow. We're quite close in age. So we've been sort of best mates. Yeah, over the years. I'm very lucky. They're obviously.
Have they ever come? Have they ever come? Have they ever come to
Dad's
visit?
been out a few times. Mum's been out. I think
Oh,
she's
good.
supposed to be arriving. I'm supposed to be in America right now, coming back, and then she was supposed to be landing in early May to come and spend a few weeks out here. I think that would have been her 13th trip.
Wow.
But,
tell me. So I was going to try and get together with you, when you were in the States, because you're doing something with National Geographic, right? Aren't you doing like some sort of touring around talking?
Yeah, so I've been speaking, just did a tour finished a tour late last year for National Geographic Live, which was awesome. Arriving and going out and giving these talks on, my evolution, and then the first half of the talk, conservation, and then, the second half of the talk about Akashinga, which is the project we have here in Zimbabwe, where all the women are at the forefront of conservation. So speaking about that.
What does that name mean, Akashinga?
Akashinga translates into the brave ones.
The brave ones. Wow.
Yeah, it's a name they come up with for themselves, and it's the only network of nature preserves in the world that are protected by women, and it's a growing network. So it's as I said, women out there doing one of the toughest, most respected jobs and absolutely killing it.
Wow. You are so. I can tell you are so proud of these women.
Yeah. Well, so soon, and maybe soon, very close to you. I'm just chatting with the Nat Geo team this afternoon, and it'll launch a short form documentary produced by James Cameron, same as a lot of the team that was involved with Game Changers. Help bring this to the big screen. So it's going to premiere, I think, in the next couple of weeks. And just more traction, getting the story out there and creating more awareness around not only what we're doing and what the women are doing, but the importance of nature and nature conservation.
Wow. So probably not the big screen, but maybe to National Geographic, right? On our screens in our houses.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah. Sure, one day it'll play out on big screen somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe you got a big screen in your house. I don't know. But,
not that big.
Looking forward to getting it out there and just seeing the reaction. Hey, I'm super proud of them, and so the program. It's not just about hiring a woman to go out there and go out there and defend an area. When they came in, the first thing we asked them is, "What are your dreams? What do you want to do? What do you want to be? Where do you want to go?" And this program for them is an opportunity to get their lives back together, to get a good salary, to buy land, to build a house, to get whatever education they want, and then go on and help uplift their communities and make room for the next wave of young women to come through and fulfill these roles.
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. You're doing such important work there, Damien.
So,
wow. Right now, what are you most excited about? I mean, anything fearful about?
I'm excited about what the other side of this pandemic looks like. And I know we're going through a crisis, but I always say, on the other side of hardship are the spoils. And I think this is a really good opportunity for us as a global community to reset, to look at what's important and what's not, to go back to basics in a lot of respects. And I mean, just look at the situation we're in. We're locked down with family, getting to spend more time with family. We don't have the opportunity to travel. It's an inconvenience. I understand it. But look at nature that has a chance to breathe. And look at us now starting to realize that the situation we're in was created through the way that we've exploited the natural world around us. And the funny part is, for all of this, funny or not, we actually, for the majority, we only give a shit when things start to personally affect us. This is something that is personally affecting every single person around the world. And, that's great. At the end of it, we've got to actually sit back and reflect on what's happened and why it happened. And if we want to avoid this going forward, we're going to have to make changes. And, that for me, the optimism within this shit situation is something that I'm happy with. It's going to be a downturn for us in terms of fundraising. It's going to be a downturn for us in terms of our operational footprint that we had been saving for and expanding out. But I think that the hardships we're going to go through here, it's going to mean things are better on the other side. Look, man, we can't change anything at the moment other than wait for this thing to ride out and put pressure on policymakers about what we can do to try and avoid this situation going forward. Yeah. It places a lot more emphasis on the work that I think, well, not only you're doing, but I'm doing in terms of protecting nature. You're doing in terms of promoting a plant-based diet and steering clear of the very diet that is at the center of causing this pandemic. And for anyone out there that doesn't agree, it's like, you just read up, man. Read the facts. This shit happens when you concentrate multiple animals and multiple species in one place because you like the taste of them.
Yeah. Damien, this has been very, very special, long overdue for us to connect. I'm sorry that it wasn't in person. Obviously I'd love to have you if the stars align, have you come to Plant Stock either next year or the year after. We'd love to make that happen so that people can meet you in person and see you on the big stage. But what I'd like to do before we close out here and say Peace Engine 2 Plant Strong, I just want to hear the background noise there where you are for about 15 seconds. Just want to hear those crickets or katydids or whatever it is.
Let me walk you over to the, so it's actually got a bit of rain going on as well. So you got a little bit of a symphony.
That right there. Love that noise. Could listen to it all night long.
I just might do that, Rip.
Well, Damien, loved the conversation. Thank you for making time. And I hope to see you sometime in the near future.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'd love to get to Plant Strong one day and catch up again in person, mate. Thank you for what you do. And thank you to all your listeners for being on the right side of history. And
where can people go to learn more about you, the organization, and give?
The International Anti-Poaching Foundation is the name of our organization, www.iapf.org. Or if you just Google anti-poaching, you'll see us come up there, get online, follow the bouncing ball, and just read about what we do. Thank you.
All right.
Cheers, man.
Damien, peace. Engine 2. Keep it plant strong.
Thanks so much to Damien Mander and his brave ones, his Akashinga at the International Anti-Poaching Foundation, for the incredible work that they are doing to protect the planet. I'll close it out by repeating one of my favorite lines from the interview. It's time that we acknowledge that our exploitation of nature and animals has the potential to be the demise of our entire civilization. Is that worth a couple of pork chops or a slice of bacon? Absolutely not. Got to agree with Damien 110%. Thank you to all of you for your support. To learn more, visit theplantstrongpodcast.com for all of the show notes and episode resources. The Plant Strong podcast team includes Lori Kordowich, Amy Mackey, Patrick Gavin, Wade Clark, and Carrie Barrett. I want to thank my parents, Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr. and Ann Kryle Esselstyn, for creating a legacy that will be carried on for generations and being willing to go against the current and trudge upstream to the causation. We are all better for it.